Welcome to BookTrib on Demand. It's great to be here today. I'm Meryl Moss, president of Meryl Moss Media and publisher of BookTrib.com. And my guest today, I'm so excited to have a very special guest today, my friend Susan Shapiro Barash, a.k.a. Susannah Marren. Today, we're going to talk about Susannah Marren, but we are all, and her new book, A Palm Beach Scandal, which I can't wait to get into. But before we get into the book, I want to talk a little bit about Susan Shapiro Barash, Susannah Marren, and Susan Shapiro Barash's nonfiction, because it really plays into how she writes her lovely fiction. Susan Shapiro Barash she's written 13 nonfiction books, 13, okay, and has done a ton of research. Some of my favorites are Tripping the Prom Queen, Toxic Friends, Little White Lies, You're Grounded Forever, Now Let's Go Shopping. Okay, these are fantastic titles that in our world today, as women, are incredibly helpful. And Susan is unbelievably insightful because of all the research she's done. Now, all the research. So Susan, thank you. Welcome.
Thank you.
Thank you for being here. I want this to be a dialogue, not just me talking about you, but we talking about you. So the book, we're going to weave in your nonfiction because it plays into a Palm Beach scandal and all the women who are close, and the mothers, the daughters, the sisters, sisterhood, husbands, and of course, Palm Beach. Now, Palm Beach is a character here. Tell us a little bit about why Palm Beach, and let's start there. Why Palm Beach?
Well, my parents were residents for decades, like say over 50 years, almost 50 years, whatever. The day I graduated high school, they became residents. And they, so actually maybe until my mother died, they really were invested in the life there and their home there, and everything about it resonated for my mother. She was from Brooklyn before it was cool, and she had never really seen a place like Palm Beach. And it mattered to her greatly. She really followed the code and the creed. And I watched her with all her friends from when I was a very little girl, and everyone was so chic and so happy to be there. And the island is so beautiful. And I've really never been anywhere else over Christmas and Easter like my entire life.
It's a gorgeous place. For those who haven't been, it's an absolutely gorgeous place. And there's something that goes through the book that that resonated for me, which is the Palm Beach smile. Now, that is indicative of a lot of things that go on in Palm Beach. Can you elaborate a little bit on the code? Because you mentioned that just a minute ago.
Well, in a place that's really so beautiful and rarefied and elegant, and in terms of a capitalistic society, let's face it, it's materialistic, and people are very privileged to live there. Let's say it's not a diverse community. And in that way, it's you would have a certain behavior to fit in, and it's very polished. And so a Palm Beach smile is one about everything always being just ideal.
So speaking of ideal, we have two sisters, Elodie and Aubrey, who are 8 years apart, right? And very close, 8 years apart and very close, but two very different sisters. One sister is caught up in the Palm Beach lifestyle and follows her in her mother's footsteps. Would you, right? And then the other sister and her sort of more bohemian kind of personality. So these two sisters are very close. Can you talk a little bit about how the relationship between the sisters and the mother?
Well, one of my first nonfiction books is called Sisters Devoted or Divided. And I interviewed myriad women all across the country about how they felt, very diverse group of women in terms of race and ethnicity and religion and education level, socioeconomic strata, to hear how they felt about their sisters. And what really struck me was that if you are close to your sister, you don't need as many girlfriends. And if you're on the outs with your sister, or sisters, it's a very painful experience. So I really looked at that research again because I had for a long time wanted to write a novel about two sisters who were quite different in style and raised very differently because, you know, with 8 years apart, the parents are in a different stage of life. And I wanted to put them to the test.
Well, that's something I wanted to get into, relationships that are tested. Because you, even with a family member, and certainly friends, you really don't know people until they are tested. Now, please talk a little bit about that.
Well, that's such a good point because I have found in all of my studies that we really don't know how strong we are and we don't know what our moral makeup is until we are tested. And so this story is really a wake-up call for two sisters who have supposedly a perfect life, and then, without giving away the book, because it happened so quickly, the older sister, Elodie, who has a great job, she's Ivy League, she's married to an it boy, it man, she ends up really with a problem, and that is that she cannot have a baby. And she feels that life is passing her by because so many of her friends, in a very, you know, conscious place where you're very conscious of who has what, already have 5-year-olds, 6-year-olds, and she craves a baby. It's about baby lust. And so she asks Aubrey, at her husband's behest, to carry the baby.
So this book is a page turner. It is deep. But it's also very, very engrossing, and you're just turning the pages and you can't wait to find out what's going on. So this is it's a sacrifice for the sister, you know, to be asked this. It creates somewhat of a scandal in their lives. There are lots of secrets. This book has almost everything. In fact, you wouldn't think it would be suspense, but it's very suspenseful. Where did your inspiration come from to have this be, you know, in this scene, be so suspenseful?
When I did my study that came out in 2008 called Little White Lies, Deep Dark Secrets, The Truth About Why Women Lie, I could not believe the secrets that I uncovered in the research. And when I interviewed several hundred women and listened to what they were keeping a secret. And so the secret is the cause and the lie is the behavior. So did they lie all the time? No, but was their secret really a lie of omission? Yes. So I wanted to take a very deep, dark secret, one that had been covered up for so long, and no one ever thought it would see the light of day. And I wanted to have two sisters face this reveal. And then the suspense is really in what happens to them as a result.
Um, there are surprises, you know, along the way there are surprises that happen throughout the novel, which keep the reader, you know, kept me really on edge. You talk about baby craving and baby lust. This is I remember, you know, some years ago that being a very popular term, um, with in vitro being very popular. There was that period. When you did your research, did you uncover a lot of this, you know, people having baby lust, baby craving, being embarrassed about having to have help getting pregnant?
All of the above. And what I'm also asking in this novel is how much of this is a societal prescription, that we're told as women that having a husband or a long-term partner and children, that these are the glittering prizes, right along with success, of course, in our careers and beauty and security, but definitely husbands, houses, children. are so important in so many different societies and so many different parts of our contemporary culture, women often feel very bold when they say no. And for Elodie, for this character, she feels that she's failing without it.
Right. She's not measuring up, so to speak. And it's a deep sadness.
And
Um,
she's being, and that's part of Palm Beach. But in fact, really, Meryl, it could take place anywhere
right.
because, you know, the difference might be in lifestyle or privilege, but the emotional yearnings for women are universal.
Um, Secrets and lies, a multi-generational family, women who are watched, judged, um, in this society. How is that, we talk about currency of education and wealth. In today's world, do you think that things are changing? Are things evolving from your perspective, given you're a professor in genre studies and
Well, this, what happens is the way that information is given to us on such a constant and immediate basis, we all know the same thing and yearn for the same rewards. For instance, I remember years ago that my students who were on scholarship would tell me, you know, when I'd be in a conference with them, not in the classroom, that they only wanted Gucci bags or Prada bags. These were scholarship students, female students who had jobs after school. But only, well, where does that come from? Well, that's not from within as much as what we're told or the nurture in our society. So there's our nature and then there's our nurture. And so, you know, and then just when you think of how many of us watch the Kardashians or how many of us are aware of label status, it's just pervasive and it affects us. And when I mentioned the glittering prizes, so that's part of status too. Did you marry the right guy? Not just did you go to the right school? And so that appeals to everyone because everyone's aware of these opportunities.
um, Aubrey, the sister, is she seems to be a little bit outside of this thinking. She has broken away. And because of that, she has can you talk a little bit there's conflict. I want to talk a little bit about the conflict that is understated conflict in this story.
It's really covert. It's not so much spoken as always in the ether. And the mother, Veronica, wants very much to belong. And so that means her daughters have to do the right thing. And so Aubrey's moving away from the family in some ways really makes it not so controllable. And and yet Elodie, who has really pleased her mother in every way, feels deficient. And Aubrey, who has broken away, is actually pretty happy. And so that begs the question, you know, what is your personal happiness and what are the expectations of family and society for you? Why do we always have to be the good girl and the pleaser?
Well, that's a very good question. I think is that that's something I think is being debated today with women, trying to finally with Me Too and being more conscious of being having more consciousness about who they are inside and outside.
To have one's voice, to have a voice. And so for Elodie in this story, what wakes her up? What is an awakening for a woman who has done everything in the right way? And for Aubrey, who has really, you know, danced to her own beat, what is she really made of underneath? And as I said, we dig deep when we move through this story, and then we see what these sisters have to decide. And it really is, it's really a test.
This book, what's so interesting is the first book in these stories, these Palm Beach stories, is called A Palm Beach Wife. And there are cameo appearances in A Palm Beach Scandal with the characters in A Palm Beach Wife. And that's given, you know, if you've read the first one, it's fun to see some of these people come back again. And there's a wonderful store that's in both books called Vintage Tales. And Vintage Tales has its own personality. It's tell us a little bit about the Vintage Tales.
Vintage Tales is fictive, so it's from my imagination. And so if you go on the avenue, on Worth Avenue, where everyone shops, and you go into one of the villas, you will not find it. But in A Palm Beach Wife, it is at the center of the story because the protagonist, Faith Harrison, owns Vintage Tales. And so Vintage Tales is this dreamy resale shop. But what's so fascinating to me about it is what it does for the women in Palm Beach. So if a husband gets into trouble and he's hauled off to prison, or there's tax fraud or any of the things that happen, well, then those women, and sometimes even with the husbands before they leave town, go up the back stairs and bring in the Hermes bags and the Chanel, you know, the Chanel wallets and all of the goods that will make at least a little money for a family that's now damaged. And then Faith is the secret keeper in this story because she never reveals who owns what. And then those who can always shop there. And someone asked me when that book came out, well, why would you go to a resale shop? Because these items are so desired and coveted and sometimes hard to come by. These resale shops have their own appeal.
Not only that, I mean, in this particular store, there are little messages that are written on
Right,
each
because
one of the
Faith's
items.
daughter, right, because Faith's daughter, who just graduated from college, has come back to Palm Beach reluctantly. And if she's going to have to work in the shop while she's waiting to get into grad school, she's such a literary know-it-all in a way, so wise that she writes these little messages, and they're almost foreshadowing. She looks at Anna Karenina,
Right.
looks at Grimm's fairy tales. Yeah, she does.
Which is so such a creative little nice little touch that your books always have. The first book, you're in your with your pen name, Susannah Marren. The first book was Between the Tides, which was about an artist and in New York City.
Yes.
Now, the next two are about Palm Beach as a character, like Elena Ferrante uses Italy or Woody Allen uses New York. I mean, the place as a character is always so fascinating because as you read these books, you might not have been there, but you feel like you can really see it. It's very cinematic, all pink and turquoise and yellow, and you really think you really can be, you are immersed. And I think the second book, Scandal, for those who are just joining us, Palm Beach Scandal, you really get further immersed in the Palm Beach lifestyle. So again, we're going back to Palm Beach being a character, but it's so if you haven't been there, you really can be there, like some of these other books. But let's talk about loyalty.
Loyalty is very important in our lives, and very important in this story. The question of being loyal to one's family it's really not a question in most cases. It's a given. And these sisters are very loyal to one another until the secret is revealed to them. And once they learn what they learn, they have such unique approaches to what to do and how it affects them that their loyalty is really tested. And because I've written several books on the role of wife in America, you know, I wrote a book called The New Wife, The Evolving Role of the American Wife. I wrote a book called Second Wives. And my last book about being a wife is called The 9 Phases of Marriage. And in each of these, I listen to women talk about their life as a pie and how much of your pie is devoted to your loyalty to your husband and your loyalty to yourself, and then your loyalty to your children and to your work. And so that's the pie. But in this novel, the mother is a Palm Beach wife. Veronica is extremely loyal to her husband and her marriage. Her girls are asking her to look at that too.
Um, the husband, the father, Simon,
Yeah.
is a very interesting character as well. And the relationship between the parents is tested also, although they want to hold up appearances. There's again, I would say this covert or this undercurrent that develops between them.
And they are a couple-centric couple, partly because of their stage in life. They have adult daughters, 40 and 32 years old, but also because their marriage has been so primary for so many years, even as they raise their daughters. And both daughters are very aware of that. And child-centric versus couple-centric marriages have really been interesting to me in my research. So I wanted to apply that to this couple. And they are definitely a popular couple in Palm Beach. And so the question of, where you fit into society and what you'll do to protect that place is also a part of the story.
Sorry, we could go on about these. That was me on mute for a second. I apologize. We could go on about a Palm Beach scandal, but there's so much suspense. I feel like, I really don't want to talk too much more about it, but I want to find out I want to say that you are out there in the world with all the research you've done. You do many speaking engagements around the country. And even now, with this book coming out, you're doing a ton of events to talk about these very, very provocative topics, that are inside a Palm Beach scandal. But out in the world, you do talk about toxic friendships, and you talk about female infidelity, and you talk about sisters devoted and divided, and all these things that are so central to our lives. You use those themes so elegantly in these stories. So your fiction, your nonfiction really has been very important and informed the fiction, which makes your writing unique to fiction.
Thank you so much. I really do feel that, having listened to thousands of women in the aggregate for my nonfiction, that I can put it into the characters for my fiction and what women really are longing for.
And what's coming next?
Another Palm Beach novel.
Okay, new characters, some of the same characters we've done.
Another dicey story.
Dicey
questions asked of the characters.
Right. Well, as we roll into fall, this book will take you to places you haven't been before, make you think about your relationships with your family, with your friends, and really kind of understand yourself and women more. So I think you've really done it here, Susan. It's a great read. Thank you so much for being with us on BookTrib.com, and we wish you the best of luck.
Thank you, Meryl.
Okay, thank you.